But before we do, we want to touch on the Little Revier Derby, which is Bochum against Dortmund. In the absence of Schalke, this is the biggest game in that region. And you know what? Like, Bochum are last with just 11 points. Dortmund, of course, stuck in the middle of the table. So this isn't exactly a top against bottom clash. This is a middle table against the bottom of the table clash. And to make things worse, this is also a match that Dortmund traditionally don't like to play very much. They have dropped points here on a regular basis, and this should make for a really interesting game. Especially, we talked about Dortmund midweek. They were excellent against Sporting. Champions League Dortmund showed up. They will have to play like Champions League Dortmund in this match because, it is one of those derbies where form and history and the standing of the table completely goes out of the window, especially when the game is in Bochum, which is like one of the best atmospheres in German football. So this is actually a pretty big game, and it is a game I think that could be another banana skin for Dortmund.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a test in its own right. Funnily enough, last time I was in Leverkusen, I actually had planned to go to a Bochum game. I think they were playing Augsburg at the time, but it was during Carnival in Cologne. And I literally went to step on the train because the train goes from Cologne through Leverkusen all the way up to Bochum. And I went to get on the train, and obviously it was full of people coming back from Cologne from Carnival. And when I say it was full, I mean it was literally full. I couldn't get on, and I thought, I'm not sitting in that carriage for like an hour and a half wait to get up to Bochum or whatever it is. So I left it. But yeah, it's a fascinating venue. It's a great venue. It's a great stadium, and it's obviously one that's done Bochum really well when they have been in the Bundesliga. And it'll be really interesting to see from their point of view whether they can kind of reforge that record they had at home. And before we started recording, I was looking up Dieter Hecken's record since he took over at Bochum. And to be fair, it's not great. It's sitting at about 0.83. Which, to be fair, is the best record of any coach since Thomas Lesch left the club. But it's still considerably below what he averaged, and probably not good enough to keep them in the division. But having said that, if you kind of look through their home form since he came in, his first game in charge was actually a 1-1 draw with Leverkusen. They then lost narrowly to Werder Bremen, who at the time were in scintillating form and are a team who kind of pride themselves on their away record. So definitely a tough game for Bochum to win. So they lost that one narrowly. They then beat Heidenheim, and then they beat St. Pauli, and then they drew 3-3 with RB Leipzig, which was of course that game where they came from 3 goals down. And then they lost narrowly to Freiburg 1-0 at the start of February. So they have kind of done a decent job of kind of scraping results at home since Heckins took over. If you compare that to the away form, 2-0 loss to Stuttgart, 1-0 loss to Augsburg, 1-1 draw with Union Berlin, 2-0 loss to Mainz, 3-0 loss to Gladbach, and then a 2-2 draw with Holstein Kiel last weekend, which Bochum fans would probably have hoped to have won, to be honest with you, if they wanted to kind of... I mean, obviously 3 points would have been huge for them if they had won that game. So, in a way, you could probably argue that Häcken has kind of slowly but surely managed to get some sort of, a song out of that Bochum team in front of their own fans. And if that Leipzig performance and the wins over St. Pauli and Heidenheim are anything to go by, not to mention the draw with Leverkusen back in November, then it would suggest that Dortmund would have to be at their absolute best to win this game. And I'm also really intrigued to see how they approach the game, because we actually talked about this on the bonus show, which you can obviously get through a Substack or a YouTube channel. And we talked about why there's this kind of fascinating dichotomy or contrast between Dortmund in the Bundesliga and Dortmund in the Champions League. And the big difference is that Sporting attacked Dortmund. They threw everything at them in midweek. They tried to win that game. They had a number of chances in the first half. And then Dortmund kind of got their act together at half-time and were able to kind of, go on and win the game. But they were able to win the game because there was space behind Sporting to run into. And I don't think they're going to have that against Bochum. So it'll demand a different style of tactic. It'll demand a different approach to the game. And and like I said, it's a completely different test, but still a very important test, especially after obviously the manner in which they kind of capitulated against Stuttgart last weekend. So yeah, I think it's a huge test, Manu, for Niko
Yeah.
Kovac. Obviously he'll be feeling good after that Sporting win, but if they go on and lose this match, then they're back to square one.
Well, also it's like not since 1984, and that was the Tino Konietzka, has a head coach started at Borussia Dortmund with 2 defeats. So that puts a lot of pressure on him, I think. I mean, it's always been this fine balance, right, between these festivals in the Champions League and Bundesliga, and it's been like this for a while now. This has been going on since the Terzic days, and I think trying to preserve what happened at Sporting is going to be very hard, as you mentioned, right? Because Bochum are going to approach this game so very differently. I think the one good news is that it looks like top striker Bodo is out for Bochum, right? He is one of those players that can really hurt you with top speed and breaks through the lines and run through the defensive line. So that I think makes things a little bit easier for Dortmund, maybe. Also note that Hacking, and this is a crazy stat that I've just found. He lost all of his last 8 games against Dortmund. So, he's on a run, but I always look at a statistic like that. He's lost his last 8 games. You just know sooner or later the record is going to flip on his head. It's like probability, right? Like sooner or later, if you roll a dice, you will get a 6. Or double 6, I guess. And it's just a matter of time until that happens. But like so many things point towards a positive ending here for Dortmund, just because I think that you can take positives away from the Sporting game. The vibes have shifted a little bit. This is a Bochum team that is really struggling in the league. They're without the top striker. And, as we mentioned, a head coach hasn't started with 2 defeats at Dortmund since 1984. That's 40 years. I know this from the top of my head because I was born in 1984, so we feel really old. But yeah, so I do anticipate that Dortmund will probably get a result here that they need just to keep things alive in the Bundesliga. I mean, this is the other thing, right? We're still talking here about a team that is currently 11th in the league. At the moment, as things stand, they need to pretty much win every single game to keep the Champions League places hope alive. Right now, it's 7 points to Leipzig, right? To 4th place. That seems doable, but it also means you have to win pretty much every single game.
Yeah, it does. And we also have to bear in mind the Dortmund's away record is still absolutely dreadful. They did pick up a win in the last away game, but that was a 2-1 win over Heidenheim, in which Heidenheim made it very kind of tricky for Dortmund. It wasn't a kind of clear-cut match by any means. And it's still a huge hindrance for this Dortmund side about getting back into top 4, top 6, whatever we think they might be capable of. So it definitely demands a different approach from the one that we saw under Nuri Sahin, that's for sure. And it'll be interesting to see obviously the performance is important, but also just the kind of body language and the kind of charisma that we see from the players, because it felt like after that Sporting win, it felt like a very kind of almost like a release of pressure at full time. It felt like everyone was just so relieved that they were everything kind of clicked into place for them for what felt like the first time in forever. Especially for Sergio Guirassy, who I think will be crucial for Dortmund in this game. And I think what will be really interesting as well is, so in this, for anyone who missed the Sporting game, Dortmund kind of managed to kind of turn things around that second half by going more or less route one with their approaches to scoring goals. What we might say is a very typical Niko Kovac style of football, which was get the balls down the wing and swing into the box. And Dortmund just did that over and over and over again in the second half, and it caused havoc with that Sporting defence, and eventually Obviously Guirassy scores a great goal. He then somehow manages to find himself out on the right wing and swings across it himself, or Pascal Gross. But, if I was Dortmund going into this Bochum game, I'd be probably saying the exact same thing. I'd be saying, look, we've got one of the most informed strikers in European football right now. He loves heading the ball into the back of the net. We don't have to overcomplicate this. We just have to make sure we dominate the wings, move Brandt out to the right if need be, get Pascal Gross out on the left, make sure you have those guys who can swing those crosses in, and just put the ball on top of Sergio Guirassy for the 90 minutes. And, I know that maybe sounds reductive, or it sounds like your old dad talking about football from back in the day, but sometimes that's what needs to be done, and that's maybe why Dortmund do struggle in these away games, because they overcomplicate it. They try and pass it into the back of the net, and there's an over-reliance on someone like Julian Brandt to play that number 10 position and be that man between the lines, when really just swinging the ball into the box for a big striker like Guirassy against a team like Bochum is usually the best way to do it.
No, 100%. Good old 1980s football is going to win you the day, because Bochum are going to play like that. You might as well embrace it. It's. I think it's going to be a fascinating fixture. And you mentioned the Heidenheim game. I think that's very much a blueprint for Dortmund how to win this particular game, because I think there's going to be a lot of similarities between that match and the game on Saturday.